welcome to fourth lecture of Programming Fundamentals, and I am Anam Ramzan. I hope you are all good and safe at your homes. So this is a lecture which gives you an introduction to the programming language which we will be using for this course, and that is C++. Let me briefly describe the history of C++. I know many of you have already worked on it as it was an assignment, but let me just briefly tell you. C++ was developed in early 1980s and it was an extension of C language. The most important feature of C++ is that it provides the capabilities for object-oriented programming. C++ was standardized in 1997 by ANSI and it is now known as Standard C++. Next we have features of C++. First is easy to learn. C++ is a high-level language, therefore it is easy for humans to learn and work with it. A programmer can develop complex programs more easily. The program written in C++ is easy to understand and modify. Then we have machine independence. C++ is machine or hardware independent. It means that a program written in C++ can be executed on any type of computer. Then we have object-oriented programming. C++ is an object-oriented programming language, and in object-oriented programming, a program is designed by using objects. It is an easy and flexible approach for designing and organizing the program. Next is modular programming. C++ provides the facility of modular programming. A programmer can divide the logic of program into smaller units called modules. These modules can be written and translated independently. Then we also have a standard library, which is a collection of predefined classes and functions that were used to perform most common tasks. So, all the common tasks are already programmed and set in libraries. New programmers can always reuse those already completed tasks. So, it is easy for programmers to use already written code instead of writing that code repeatedly again and again. And C++ provides you this feature of standard libraries. Then we have hardware control. Like assembly language, the programmer can write programs in C++ to directly access or control the hardware components of computer system. That is why some of the operating systems are written using C and C++ languages. Let me move towards the basic structure of C++ program. The format or way according to which a computer program is written is called the structure of the program. The basic structure of C++ program is very simple. It consists of three main parts. First is preprocessor directives, then comes the main function, and then we have C++ statements. Here I have explained you all these with the help of an example. Let's look at the example. Here we have written hash include iostream.h. Hash include here is the preprocessor directive. Then int main is the main function. It is the point where actually the execution of the program starts. And then in between the curly brackets of main function, we have our statements, which are known as C++ statements. We will discuss these basic parts of C++ program in very detail. First, I am going to discuss the preprocessor directives. The instructions that are given to the C++ compiler before the beginning of the actual program are called preprocessor directives. The processor directives are also known as compiler directives. A preprocessor directive does not end with a semicolon. All the statements within the main program will be having a semicolon at end. But the preprocessor directives do not need any semicolon. The preprocessor directives consist of instructions for C++ compiler actually. The C++ compiler takes action on these instructions during translating the source code into object code. Now, these instructions are actually read by the compiler and compiler acts according to these instructions during translation when the compiler is translating the source code into object code. The part of C++ compiler that takes action on the preprocessor directives is called preprocessor. So, within the compiler, the actual part which works on preprocessor directives is known as preprocessor. It adds special instructions or code from these directives into the program at the time of compilation. The preprocessor directives normally start with a hash number sign or hash sign followed by a word. This word can be include or define. For example, preprocessor directives are mostly used to include header files in C++ program. Please don't get confused with the word header files. This is exactly what we are going to discuss after preprocessor directives. So, the most important preprocessor directives are include directive and define directive. Let me first explain the include directive. The include directive is used to include the header files in the program. It means that this preprocessor directive tells the preprocessor to insert the definitions of standard functions or classes into the C++ program from a standard library. For example, in the last program, we have seen that iostream.h was included using the hash directive, just as shown here. The hash include iostream.h, the text which is written in red. This is actually a preprocessor directive. Hash include is a preprocessor directive and iostream.h is a header file. So we are using the include directive actually to add iostream.h to my program. I'm not discussing the define directive at this point. We will be discussing it later in some upcoming lectures. As you might not get it now, we will discuss it inshallah in our upcoming lectures. Next we have C++ header files. The header file I was adding in our last slide. For example, yes, iostream.h, it was a header file. So, the header files contain the declarations or information of standard library functions or objects. The header files also contain definitions of various data types and constants needed by the functions. The extension of header file is .h. In C++, there are many header files. Each header file contains different types of predefined functions or objects. A header file must be included in the program before calling any of its function or object in the program. Many header files can be included in a single C++ program. Here I have mentioned this general syntax to include a header file. That is, you will use the number sign, which is hash. Then you will use the keyword, which can be include or define in most of the cases, or in this case it is include. And then using the angle bracket, within the angle bracket you will write the name of the header file. For example, hash include iostream.h. And the name of the header file is always written within the angle bracket. Next comes the main function. The main function comes after the preprocessor directives, and it is actually the beginning or opening of the C++ program. This is a gate to our program. Why do we call this as a gate? Because it is the point from where the actual execution of the program starts. So, the main function must be included in every C++ program. When a C++ program is executed, the control goes directly to main function and start executing its statements. Here is the general syntax of a main function, which shows you will write void, or you can also write any data type at place of void. At some places you might see that in some books or some internet sources you might see that there is mentioned int main. That is also correct, and void main is also correct. So you will write your main function, and then within the curly brackets you will have the body of main function, which will be having the set of statements, and those statements would be actually the instructions which you are giving to the computer. Next I have C++ statements. A program statement is a fundamental unit of any programming language. It is an instruction for the computer to do something. The statements of C++ program are written under the main function between the curly brackets. Each statement of C++ program ends with a semicolon. Now this is a very important point. You have to take care of this point every time you are going to write a program. You must end each statement of this program with a semicolon. It is called statement terminator. The semicolon is called statement terminator. If statement terminator is missing at the end of any statement, then you can see an error message. There would be a problem in compiling the program. And I must also mention that C++ is a case-sensitive language. The C++ statements are normally written in lowercase letters. Here is an example. Basically, a simple C++ program is displayed here. And what is this program doing? This program is just going to clear the screen and display a message welcome on the screen. So we start with hash include iostream.h. I am including first header file whose with name iostream. Then hash include conio.h, including second header file, and then main function. Within the main function we have clear screen. This function will clear out the output screen. Then cout welcome, cout console out. This instruction is used whenever you want to show something on the screen. So this instruction will display welcome on the screen and then return 0. It will end the program. So this is how C++ statements are written, and you might have noticed that everything that is written within the main program has a semicolon at its end. So we have discussed the basic structure of C++ program today. The basic structure of C++ program consisted of basic three parts. First one is preprocessor directives. The second one is the main function, and then within the main function we have C++ statements. Preprocessor directives, the instructions that are given to the C++ compiler before the beginning of the actual program are called preprocessor directives. We have normally two types of preprocessor directives. Those are include and define directives. Then we have header files. The header files contain the declaration of or information of standard library functions, which means that repeatedly needed tasks are already done and saved in header files, which can be reused later by the programmers. Then we have the main function. The main function is actually the beginning of the program, and it has the body which is known as C++ statements. C++ statements are actually those instructions that we are giving to the computer in order to complete some specific task. Each of the statement must end with a semicolon. In the next lecture, we will be discussing more detail, going in more depth of C++ language. I hope you will be enjoying it. I will share with you the compilers which you should start downloading. And best of luck. Stay safe at your homes. You can ask me any questions anytime. You're more than welcome. Thank you very much. Allah Hafiz.